Hi, everybody. Thanks for joining us this evening here for the launch of Bone House. My name is John Walsh. I'm the commissioning editor at Doire Press, and we're very, very pleased to be launching Moyra's second collection with Doire Press. It's her second collection with us, but it's her 9th collection in total. And it's a triangular link-up this evening. We have Moyra in Newtownards. We have Nessa O'Mahony in Dublin, or Bray, I'm not too sure about that. And myself here in Connemara with the sun going down behind me. You can see it in the curtains. And we're very pleased that so many people have joined us. And I'm going to introduce Nessa now to launch the book. Nessa will be asking Moyra to read a few poems. And then she will also be doing a Q&A with her, question and answer. And so if you have any questions that you would like to ask Moyra, you can put them in the comments, and we will feed them in to Moyra, and hope she will have some answers for you. So right now, let me click. Nessa, hi Nessa.
Hey John, how are you? Greetings from a very sunny Dublin. I'm in Rathfarnham, I have to say.
Oh, you're Rathfarnham, okay.
I'm a Dublin girl.
Oh, very good, very good. Well, thanks for joining us this evening, and thanks for accepting the invitation to launch Moyra. And yeah, I can see your son also behind you there.
Absolutely,
nice.
It is, and it's wonderful to be here. Wonderful to be reading and introducing this fantastic new book from Moyra Donaldson. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to introduce her. She's asked me not to do those long gushing, telling you every prize that she's got from babies onwards. So I'm not going to do that, but I am going to tell you a little bit about her. And then Moyra is going to read for about 20 minutes or so. And then we're going to have a bit of a question and answer. And hopefully, because we have live chat going on in YouTube, we'll be able to bring in some of your questions towards the end. So that's the plan for the day. So let me tell you a bit about Moyra first. She was born and raised in County Down and educated at Queen's University Belfast and the University of Ulster. She's married with 2 grown-up daughters, and I think recently she became a grandmother as well. She's been described as one of the country's most distinctive and accomplished writers, a poet whose voice is full of integrity and mystery. She's published 9 collections, as John was saying. Her first full collection, Snakeskin Stilettos, was published by Doire Press in 1998 and described in Poetry Ireland Review as quite simply a brilliant debut. And writing of her last collection, Carnivorous, which was also published by Doire in the Dublin Review of Books, Deirdre Hines said that the tragic notion of the image is always present in her work. Her poems arrest us, catch us unawares in their lack of soft edges, their use of the architectural space to bring us on quite uncomfortable journeys among the realm of the dead. Moyra's poetry has won a number of awards, including the Allingham, the National Women's Poetry Competition, the Court New Writing Award, and both her poetry and her short stories have been shortlisted for a Hennessy New Irish Writing Award. She's also received 5 awards from the Arts Council of Northern Ireland, most recently the Major Artist Award in 2019. Her work has been anthologised and has featured on BBC Radio and television, and including the Channel 4 production Poems to Fall in Love With. So her new collection is Bone House, and there is a wonderful introductory essay by Paula Meehan in which she describes it as ferocious and clear-eyed, and speaks about its exploration and interrogation of private memory, especially through the mitochondria of the matrilinear legacy. And Moyra is going to read from it now.
Thank you so much, Nessa. Thank you for agreeing to launch the book tonight. It's really lovely to have you here to keep me company. It's very strange to be sitting on your own, launching a book, but I'm aware that lots of people have come along to listen, and I just really want to thank everybody that's taken time out to be here this evening. There's a few people I want to thank before I start reading. I want to first of all thank Lisa and John of Doire Press. for all the work and all the support that they've given me and all the work they've done on the book. True champions of poetry. I'd also like to thank Triona Walsh for the wonderful book cover, and Paula Meehan for her very generous introduction. I'd also like to thank my friend Emma Must, who did a very close reading of the manuscript for me. Damien Smith, for all his support that goes back many years now. He's been a constant support and a constant encourager of my work. I'd like to thank the Arts Council for the last award that I received, the Major Artist Award. And I'd also like to thank everyone who's just kind of messaged or got in touch or sent an email or a text, whatever it might be, to wish me luck for tonight. Thank you all. It has really meant a lot to get your messages during today. So I'd like to start off, read a few poems from the book. And I'm going to start off with the first poem in the book. And I have my prop ready for that. It's called So What If We Break Them? We are using the good glasses, cut crystal, delicate flutes, the ones with a snake on the stem bought in our early, heady days. Glasses that don't usually get brought out except for special occasions. Bonehouse. Skin a cat more ways than that. Rat-a-tat-tat. Open the door and see who's there, I dare you. Father becomes dust. Father who carried fire, heat to the hearth. Mother gets no rest, parading through the night, eternal like the moon. Of all the impossible things, the worst is her sadness. Haunted because not humbled. Sit beneath the weight of days until you become stone, fossil. What was this? Did this once live? It was not their lives that mattered, it was their lives that mattered. It's little things, like the electric candles screwed onto the piano. Here's the moon again in the aftermath, with the rain falling and only a small stone in my hand. All that fear and hope and pleading, all that needing to be saved. A son's a son till he gets a wife, a daughter's a daughter all of her life. Under the moon, my mother. The child's garden. Gooseberries, raspberries, strawberries, sweetness. How long does it take a fly to walk through a barrel of treacle with its clogs on? Oh, what peaches, miracle fruit, to linger forever on the tongue, fuzzy with heat, soft with summer, espaliered against innocence. Vine, sinewing across the roof, grapes never ripened, bunches of bitter green, disappointment hanging over everything. Laburnum lifts her yellow skirts, pulls her roots from earth, comes at me across the garden with her purses of poison. Mother was the weather. Sun and cloud, storm and blizzard, drought and flood, snow and ice. Our hearts became barometers, sensitive to every change in pressure, isobars widening or coming together, mercury rising or falling. Rock of Ages. Fear was the rock on which our faith was built, fed in mother's milk through generations in prayer and catechism, chapter, verse. Fear was my nourishment. It formed my bones and sinews, grew me up in contradictions and in all the ways of loss. My poor mother envisaged me in hell, eternally, gone like Persephone in her dark god's lap, but worse, no possibility of coming back. A living God has always been a fearful thing. Drumherk. My uncle took over the farm when his father retired. There was a good room that you weren't allowed into, ever, though the door was left ajar so you could glimpse the big mahogany dresser laden with brass ornaments. A picture on the wall in the living room said that God was the unseen guest, the silent listener to every conversation. His holy, ghostly presence was everywhere. A door off the living room led into the tiny scullery, and to the side of the fireplace another door. It was never opened. Dread seemed to live behind it. There was no television, no comforts. A dry toilet out in the yard, holes in a piece of wood to hover over with a yellow mass of turds beneath. You had to pass the farm dog to get there, a collie dashing at you to the end of its chain. My cousin pointed at cracks in the dry earth, said down there was where the devil lived. Once my mother took our dog to help with a ratting job. My uncle shifted the old threshing machine out of the corner of the barn, and the rats poured out in a grey flowering of horror. The dogs grabbed, shook, broke necks, blood on their muzzles. The next poem I'd like to read is called Blowflies, Love. Something must have died behind the kitchen cupboards, for each morning there's another batch of blowfly, slow and empty though, vacant, as if whatever hatched them was not wet enough, not sufficiently putrescent to nurture more than these zombie flies. But convictionless against the window, ugly iridescent jewels on the succulent's leaves. So different from the urgent, seething mass that afternoon in my teenage bedroom, manifested while I was at school and I already steeped in horror story gothicness. What had brought them here to blacken my window with their noisome swarm, turning the day to fright? My mother went in, closed the door behind her, dealt with it. There are 4 poems through the collection, all called Bone House, and this is the second one of them, Bone House. Can I mother if I am always daughter? My breasts remember milk. Each egg contains a song. A bud has no regard for wind or storm. Fabric of my body, fate woven from blood. Eternity in her milky breath. What did you think it would be like? A sudden shaft of light. My demented mother, who doesn't know me anymore, looks up as I come into the room. Ah, there's my wee darling Moyra, she says, such love in her voice that everything falls away but love. The slate is clean, and I, newborn again and perfect, know myself beloved daughter before the darkness closes in again. There are a few poems in this book that are written from the point of view of a kind of mythological character. And this one is Hecuba, and the poem is called Hecuba in the Bhutan Estate. The Bhutan Estate is a housing estate quite close to where we live. And there's a little quote from Dante at the beginning. Then, reft of sense, did she bark like a dog. Such mighty power had a grief to wrench her soul. I am the lip-curled cur that can't be kicked aside. You can't outstep me, despite the booze and bluster with the boys, the red-handed comrades, the drug runners, the ones you send to take a baseball bat to a girl in an upstairs flat, big man. I am the bitch mother that howls outside your window on those dark nights when sleep is hard to find. Mind you never leave your door ajar, or I'll be in your bed with you, blood on my mad jaws, tearing open the yellow flab of your belly, eating your balls. Hecuba is still intent on revenge. Okay. This next poem is called Wildfire. It's all mixed up in my head, burning behind my eyes, burning trees, animals, a woman wrapping a dying koala in her white shirt, lungs of the world burning. The burning monk. I still have the photo, black and white, cut from a newspaper. He burned like a candle, never moved a muscle. A naked girl running, burning, her outstretched arms, her anguished face. Lungs taken out, a gift of lungs put in, miraculous, brutal. First breath she took, same air I breathe. Her last breath, our lungs, my lungs, lungs of the world, sparks in the air, not as if we weren't warned. This next poem is called Ballywiskin Beach, and it's a little beach where we used to, the family used to rent a little cottage when I was a child, not very far, just down the Ards Peninsula. This is Ballywiskin Beach. How wide the beach, how high the cliffs, the teeming sea, little flatfish, pipefish, rocklings, mermaid's purse, kelp and bladder wrack drawn aside to reveal a sideways scuttle of crabs, rock pools where sea anemones flower and periwinkles of jeweled currency, gathering dulse to dry and eat, salt, the dawning light, my father singing the shrimp boats are a-coming, my softly mother, tartan picnic rug, sun skin castles made of sand, moats filled by buckets carried from the tide, the length of days, calm rolling deep of night, tenor G from New Island foghorn, sounding like the voice of the sea in the dreaming dark. It seemed I closed my eyes and dreamed a life, or else where did it go, the time? Tonight I see how the beach is narrow, the cliffs are merely rocks, no height at all. The child is memory, mother and father too, all disappeared beneath the tide of years. All now is remembering. I close my eyes again. How high the cliffs, how wide the beach. Years ago when I was driving along in the car and I heard an interview with Janice Winehouse, Amy's mother, and it's really stuck in my head. So when I was writing about mothers and daughters, she came back into my mind again. And this poem is just called Daughters Who Dance with Death. And there's a little quote from Janice Winehouse: the relentless cycle of thinking you would lose her and then not losing her. Every time I saw her, I thought it would be the last. And after years of it, it takes little to pitch you into the panic that it has happened, and how will you bear it when finally you hear? And if it's not this time, it may be the next. Round and round, you dance with it. I'll read maybe a couple more. I'll read 3 more poems. There are places in the book, this book sort of written over the last year. Time seemed to become a very strange thing over the last year. So it was good to have places that were marked in the year in old kind of traditional ways. This poem is called Samhain. Even before dusk had fully fallen, the dogs began to arrive, eager to be called again by their names. They crowded round us, wanting what we had for them: bed, bone, love. The cats were later to appear, stalking in as if they'd no real need. They'd long shrugged off what we had called them, reverted to their own wild language. But still, they deigned to allow us their weight in our laps and their purring warmth. When the moon had fully risen, the horses came galloping, their hooves unshod, their breath pluming the air. They had forgiven us everything. I've been twice now in Iceland, and I really love Iceland. It's the most amazing place. And the last time I was there was a few months before my granddaughter that Nessa mentioned was born, and this is a little poem about that. It's called First Glimpse of Orcas in Flaxaflow Bay. We've stood on deck for hours until we're nearly frozen, nearly given up. Our small family, husband, wife, our 2 grown girls, and our granddaughter swimming in her own warm amniotic ocean. Then a shout goes out. My body begins to tremble. In the very crest, the blessing of their movement upwards, in the curve of their black bodies, hung for one moment against the white ice space between sea and sky, I am lifted on their shining backs into a fierce new longing. And I'll just finish with this little poem, the last poem in the book, and it's called Hearing. Our singing bowl's been silent for years, dusty among raven, swan, hare, lucky elephants. I pick it up, hold it in my palm, and strike felted stick against the beaten brass, and the baby's eyes widen. She smiles delighted as concentric rings of pure sound fill the ordinary day with what could be prayer. Thank you.
Moyra, I could sit here listening to you all night. So maybe we'll be able to coax another 1 or 2 out of you before the end of the evening. I was very curious about, this is your 9th collection. So maybe we'll talk in a minute about how you sustain the desire to have something to say poetically over that number of books. But given that Paula Meehan in this fantastic introduction to Bone House talks about how you draw on female figures, and we heard some of them there, both the mythological, the fictional, Alice from Alice in Wonderland appears, as well as Hecuba. And Paula says that they're sort of serving as your avatars, your quest for truth. So I just wondered whether you'd like to talk a little more about, why those figures, why somebody like Hecuba, what that allowed you to do.
Yes, I mean, I think even the word avatar is quite interesting, because I think that kind of the double meaning that it has in terms of a kind of a divine teacher, but also the modern meaning of the word in terms of the online meaning of the word. And so I think avatar, in doing a lot of reading and researching and thinking about female characters and females in myths and in mythology, I think the ones that ended up in the book are the ones that I felt had something, might have some comment to make on contemporary life, in terms of looking at it and wondering what has changed. Still having that same desire to comment on life that they had in those myths, and perhaps their voices, weren't really heard properly. So it's, I suppose the ones that ended up in the book were the ones that said to me, look, I can comment on that. I know, I understand that. I have something to say in a contemporary commentary on what's going on. I don't know if that makes sense, but
it makes perfect sense, and it's reminded me, particularly we're coming up to the first anniversary of the death of Evan Boland, and she found a place in mythology. She in a poem like Pomegranate, she says, it's the only story I've ever loved, and whatever age you are, there is a place for you in that mythology. So I'm just wondering whether those universal myths mean different things at different stages in life, and is that one of the things that you found interesting?
Yes, I mean, I think I think on a very basic level, I think when I was younger, when I was reading them, I had a certain perspective on them, almost as kind of daughter's perspective on them. And then I think as you get older and you become a mother, and as I am now a grandmother, the kind of your perspective on those voices changes, and you see different things in the story. You see different things that that you perhaps didn't notice when you were younger, and the stories kind of grow and deepen, and their meanings become wider and deeper, the more you live with them, I think.
Because certainly the sense there are several mothers here. There's your mother, there's your role as mother, there's your daughter's role as mother, because she now has her own daughter. So it's sort of like that hall of mirrors, isn't it? Sort of like one mother reflects another mother reflects another mother.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, I think when I started off thinking about writing this book, I think I started off with very grandiose ideas about kind of, researching mother-daughter relationships and it being a kind of sociological commentary almost. And when it came down to it, I mean, that through all my collections, my mother has been in all of them, and my mother is still in my dreams and in my life very much, even though she's been dead for a long time now. So in the writing of the book, it became a lot more personal and a lot more about what I had been handed down and what I had then passed on to my daughters, and how that goes through the generations. I think that was really what sort of interested me in the end, and in writing about mothers and daughters. But also, I think the mother-daughter relationship is really interesting. It can be quite problematic. I mean, I have lots of friends who have, actually very fractured relationships with their mothers, or else very difficult relationships. Some of them, obviously that's not universal, but it just struck me that mother-daughter relationships, for all kinds of reasons, can be quite difficult, and it can be difficult to find find your way into the role that you take on.
But I mean, there's not a shred of sentimentality in any of your explorations of any of these relationships. Terms were being used here in the chat tonight. How visceral, how packing a punch your poetry is. So that's one of the remarkable things about you, that you just unflinchingly look at these things and aren't afraid to call them what they are.
Well, I think, sorry, I was just going to say that I think I struggled with writing this book initially. I didn't know how to do it. I knew I wanted to do it, but I wasn't quite sure how to do it. And just at a certain point, I just thought, you just have to say things. You just have to. So there was an element of kind of, facing the fear of being too blunt about things, or being, not ameliorating things too much, to just say the thing. And it took me a while to get to that point, to just think, right, you just got to say it. You just got to say what it is you want to say.
So do you get braver with each book, do you think?
I think you do. I think you also get braver as you get older, when you don't really give too much of a
toss.
Yeah, that's the word. Yeah, when it becomes less important what other people think of you, or actually the work either, because it's it is what it has to be, and there's not really anything I can do about that. It is what it is, to be cliched about it. But yeah, I do think you get braver as you get older, and I think also kind of, as you write, you find ways of saying things that maybe you couldn't even have found a way to say when you were just starting out.
So tell us a bit about the title is Bone House, beautiful book. Everybody buy it. And as you said, there are 4 poems with that title, sort of almost like a spine, like a sort of a knotty spine throughout the book. Tell us a bit about what you were thinking of. I was, one of the things that I was putting away from it was this sort of sense of the relationship with the ancestors in some way that,
Yeah.
But that was my reading. What did you see it as?
Well, I suppose there's several things. A story that kind of was in my head was years ago. A Japanese friend of mine told me about her father's funeral, and I wasn't aware that after cremation, the family then lift the bones that are left with chopsticks and place them into a funereal urn. So also, I mean, I suppose the other kind of meaning of bone house is charnel house or ossuary, somewhere where you put the bones. So that was one meaning it had for me, in terms of, I felt as if I was picking up these bones, these things that were littered through my mind or through my life or through what I was thinking about, picking them up and placing them into the book, and in a kind of almost in a kind of reverential way, as well as being, almost reverentially. Mm-hmm. But also the kind of idea of the bone house, that we live in a house of bone, that we come from a house of bone, that is, that's what we all are. Our minds, we live in this house of bone. So it was that kind of double meaning, really, to it that I had in mind.
Mm-hmm. Can I ask you a little about influences? Because again, in her fabulous introduction, Paula Meehan talks about Blake, William, and I think we can certainly see references to Yeats there, echoes of T.S. Eliot's Wasteland once or twice. Do you see yourself in dialogue with other writers, either the ones that you grew up reading or the ones that you're reading now?
I think when I was writing this book again, it was through the last, this year of it's quite surreal year that we've all been having, and I found myself at times quite overwhelmed by the amount of poetry that was coming at me from different directions, from online books. Just there seemed to be such an amount of poetry that I found it a bit daunting. So I found myself kind of going back to the poets that I grew up reading and that I loved, and that had, I suppose, brought about my first love of poetry. So while I wasn't consciously, referencing those poets, I think that they crept into the poems, and that their influence became part of the book. I mean, mm-hmm. I love so many modern poets and so many contemporary poets, but in going back to those kind of first loves, those first bones of my love of poetry, I think that they came in almost by osmosis into this particular collection.
And what about then your landscape and because County Down, I think, features, not surprisingly, the Mournes, the East Coast. How conscious are you of this? This is sort of territory that has been walked by other poets, that you're making it yours. Does that pass through your head? I know anytime I try and write a poem about Connemara, I think, oh no, Moya Cannon does it so much better. So how do you deal with that fear of influence?
The landscape is really important for me. I mean, we're really lucky where we live at the kind of at the top of the Ards Peninsula, which is an absolutely beautiful area, and we spend a lot of time just kind of down around the peninsula, and it's one of those places that every time you go there, there's something. You know, the light's different, the sky's different, the morns are kind of this distant sentinels across the loch, and I just love it. And so I think that the landscape is very important for me. I think I'm probably fortunate in that I don't know that there aren't a huge number of poets that I'm aware of anyway. They're probably all going to tell me differently now, but I don't think the Ards Peninsula is particularly well known for its poetry. Of course, Paul Maddern lives there, so that's one.
And he's been bringing many's a poet to County Down to his wonderful River Mill, hasn't he?
Yeah, that's indeed, yeah. To experience how gorgeous it is around that area. So yes, I mean, it feels like my landscape. I have to say, I kind of feel some ownership of it. Yeah.
Damien Smith had to teach me how to pronounce Lacal right, and I probably got it wrong again.
No, yeah.
But we're a bit woefully ignorant down south about the wonderful traditions and landscape.
Patrick, Damien's down Patrick, but it's kind of I'm on the other side of the loch from that. So
is that the posher side?
Oh, absolutely, yes. Wouldn't you know?
I'm going to open it up to the audience in a minute. So I'll ask one more question, and that might allow people put a little question or two into the chat box that we can filter into you. But I can't talk to you without talking about horses. Wonderful previous collaborations with the artist Paddy Lennon on that Blood Horses exhibition plus collection of poems. I know you're a writer. I've seen those photographs on Facebook. What does the horse represent to you?
Horses are just such beautiful creatures. I love to look at them. I love how they move. But for me, there's something really kind of, I suppose they're my totem animal to some extent. But there's something about horses. It seems to me that there's almost a kind of some kind of mystical contract between horses and humans, because I think what horses do for humans is unbelievable. Their generosity of spirit and their willingness to try their hearts out for humans in whatever capacity they're asked to do it, whether that's dragging a plough or going into battle or jumping a huge fence. Their willingness to partner with us, there's something really special about that. And I enjoy being around horses. I find them really relaxing to be around most of the time, unless they're sick or misbehaving or something. But generally speaking, they're very relaxing to be around. I just love being in their presence. I suppose it's just as simple as that, really, and always have from I was a small child. I just wanted to ride horses. Yeah.
I'm just keeping an eye on the chat over there, and there's a lot of love coming for you, and people pointing out that your name was on a whiteboard at Strangford Lough College today in Year 10 English class discussing inspirational Ards County Down poets. So there you go. But nobody's actually, that I can see, asked a specific question, so I'll ask another one. You're pretty unflinching in your exploration of religion, formal and informal. In the poem Rock of Ages, which you read, you tell us a living God has always been a fearful thing. And in the poem Made Flesh, you warn us to beware the God who constructs himself as human. Do you want to talk a bit more about that? What's your issue?
Well, I was brought up in a very religious family, certainly on my mother's side. Her father, my grandfather, would have been someone who preached in mission tents and mission halls, and I see him as very much having come out of that kind of the great revival that happened in the north. Calvinist, very strict, very stern, very dour. And that had a huge influence on his family and on my mother. And it was really only in thinking about that I kind of started to understand some of the reasons why my mother was very unhappy, how that constricted her, and how it made her life very difficult. And I think, out of concern, out of love for her own children, she passed that on. We were brought up in that same very strict and very religious way. And I just think it causes such damage, such kind of spiritual damage, such emotional damage, that, seeing it in my own family, I can see it very, very clearly. I also, I just think that the feminine has gone from any kind of spirituality or religion, or, all the world's main religions are patriarchal. There's no room for the feminine, for the concept of the divine feminine. And I think that plays out in society and in all of our lives. And I hate it. I just don't want to have any part of it. And I think we're so out of balance. There's such an emphasis on the father and on the male God and on that kind of patriarchal society that, again, it throws everything completely out of balance. And we need to find a way to get that balance between masculine and feminine back again in some way. I don't know if that answers the question.
No, it does. And you're reminding me, I was having a conversation with my 92-year-old mother the other day, telling her about the catacombs in Rome that depict women priests from the sort of the very, very earliest days of the Christian period. And then they kind of almost get closed down, and the Vatican denies that in any way there was any suggestion ever that there were women involved in officiating in Christianity. So it's...
there seems to be such a fear of women in religion. We are to be feared.
Nandi Jola has asked in the chat, she's thanking you for exploring the mother-daughter relationship, and asks, what research or methodology did you use?
I just did lots of reading. I read quite a lot of kind of psychoanalytical theory. I read, books that I'd read as a younger woman, things like my mother, myself, a lot of kind of psychology and things like that, and started to just kind of explore what people were saying about that relationship. I read various novels. I read sort of lots of, as much as I could get my hands on that looked at that kind of mother-daughter relationship. As I said, at the beginning, I had grander ideas for the book in terms of, that kind of psychoanalytical stuff, exploring that some more, but it came down in the end being a lot more personal. But all of that reading kind of fed into my thinking in the poems and in the book.
And people really congratulating your essay in the Irish Times today. So Google Moyra and Irish Times if you want to get the link, or somebody might be able to put that into chat if people want to have a look at that later. It would be lovely to maybe hear another poem. John has just come back because I think he wants to kick us out.
No, I actually wanted to ask Moyra to read one more poem.
That was it. I was going to get in there before you and do the very same thing.
My poem, Moyra, is The Day's Eye.
The Day's Eye, yes, I'd be very happy.
Page 67. I think I would love you to read. Nessa, what poem were you thinking of?
Well, I was wondering if she had the empty house handy, might she read her wonderful poem Mercury Rising in that? But she may not have it. She may not have it to hand, in which case I'd be happy to read it for her.
I don't have it to hand, Nessa, but if you want to read it, you would be very, very welcome. Yes. Yeah.
Okay, Nessa, you go first.
Okay, hang on. Page 71 of this wonderful book, which will be launched next week, The Empty House, a book of poetry and prose about climate change. Let me just find it now. And it actually, you have to see this on the page. It's an extraordinary thing that Moyra has pulled off. Hang on. There you go. Shape of a thermometer. Mercury rising. Bees, trees, grass, rhizomes, moss, corals, locusts, and then 2100. By this date, 50% of every species on Earth, extinct leopards, moths, and parakeets, whales, giraffes, green sea turtles, mountain gorillas, leatherback sea turtles, American pike, Colombian spotted frogs, bog hoverflies, ringed seals, and lions, Asian elephants, elephants African, Atlantic cod and Atlantic salmon, monarch butterflies, eastern cougars, giant pandas, penguins, koalas, tigers, snow leopards, polar bears, all the red listed, and 2019, the already gone 150 species each and every day, Pyrenean ibex, the Spix macaw, 2010, Vietnamese rhino, last female killed and horn removed, Christmas Island pipistrelles, longjaw tristramelas, Yangtze dolphins, Alatra grebe tasmanium, tigers, Pinta Island, tortoises, stellar, sea cows, St. Helena earwigs, ermine moths, burrowing mayflies, Maui upland damsonflies, cry pansy, Bennett seaweed, hemp nettles, Appalachian yellow asphodels, western black rhinoceros, woolly stalked begonias, lamb, succory, robber frogs, golden toads, cloud leopards, downy black-faced honey creepers, Chinese paddlefish.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you for that, Nessa. Thank you.
That was well done.
The print was very small, John.
That was excellent in the spur of the moment. So over to you, Moyra.
Thank you. Okay.
Day's Eye.
The Day's Eye. They said it was a fine year, full of brightness. I didn't notice. Living in the shadows remnant, I found myself surprised by summer's glow on the skin of others, taken aback by their sunlit conversations, by their remarking on the good weather. Give me time, and I may open in the full gaze of your innocent light. Thank you.
Well, there you go, everybody. Thank you very, very much, Nessa, for a wonderful Q&A and an introduction. And Moyra, as the comments say, thank you very, very much for an absolutely wonderful reading. And
thank you to your directorial debut.
Exactly.
Well,
so,
yeah.
I just happen to have a little glass beside me here to toast Bonehouse, Moyra, and here's to all who sail in her.
Thank you, John. Thank you,
Well
Nessa.
done, Moyra.
Thank you very much. Sláinte.
Cheers.